Do we get wine?
Yeah, you want to drink some?
Sure.
Okay. Good call, Kenji. So, what are we going to talk about?
Tofu.
Tofu.
Tofu, I think is what we're talking
So, hello everybody. Welcome. Before we get started, talking about what we don't know what we're talking about, I would love to thank Tui and Jordan for putting together this program. They are very expensive if you want to hire them for weddings. I can probably guarantee the lineup of chefs that they can bring to the event as well. I'm super excited. I'm a little crazy to have Kenji here because he is that food scientist that's going to grill me about tofu. And for the last decade or so, I've been making it up. So when we go over there, I'm going to put my reputation on the line. So to demonstrate tofu making and how it's evolved, and Kenji's going to be looking over my shoulder and...
Well, trying to learn. I mean, I'm honestly probably more excited to be here because I cook a lot, and I've tried to make tofu in the past, and I've never done it particularly successfully. So I'm actually looking forward to learn how it's done properly.
No pressure.
Yeah. Tofu for me, it's actually two of my best eating experiences have been with tofu, and also two of my worst eating experiences have been with tofu. The two best were the first time I went to Japan in Kyoto. We had a meal. I was with my mother. My mother's Japanese, and my grandparents are obviously also Japanese. I grew up in New York, but with my mother and my grandparents all living in an apartment in New York, and they came over directly from Japan. And so I went back and visited Japan with them, and we went to Kyoto and went to a little restaurant at the top of the mountain there by a temple, and we had a full tofu meal. So we had yudofu, like boiled tofu, we had cold tofu, we had rolled yuba, we had grilled tofu on little skewers. It was 100% soy-based meal that was one of the best eating experiences I've ever had. And the second one was when I was just a couple years ago with my wife. We were in Chengdu. And we went to the original mapo tofu, the place where mapo tofu was invented, which was a dish that my mother used to make growing up. Mapo tofu is a Sichuan dish with silken tofu, traditionally made with beef, although often you'll find it with pork these days, with chili oil and fermented soybeans, fermented horse beans, actually. And my mother used to make it growing up, but she would make... she grew up eating the Japanese version of mapo tofu, which is a lot sweeter and less spicy than the Chinese version, the Sichuan version. And the version she made at our house was actually a further adaptation. What she would do is we would make dumplings about once a month. My sisters and I would sit there and she would make the filling, we'd sit there and fold the dumplings. And then all the leftover dumpling filling, she would fry it up and then add some sauce and fold in the silken tofu. And that was one of my favorite things growing up. We called it mapo gorp because of the it was like an onomatopoetic because of the sound it made when it went on the plate. I still make that version at home sometimes. But we went to the original mapo tofu house in Chengdu, and it was
what about the bad
incredible
experience?
Oh,
you can tell at least one, just one.
Well, okay, I can tell you both. One of them was when I tried to make tofu, and when I tried to make a silken tofu, instead I ended up with this sort of semi-coagulated, broken slop that.
That's the hardest thing to make.
Silken tofu. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I jumped into the deep end there, I guess. The other one was when I found out that I was allergic to raw soy milk when I drank a glass of it, and then had to go to the hospital. So tofu is safe, but I got to stay away from the raw stuff.
Yeah, legumes. I'm glad you brought up the mapo tofu example, because for tonight's program, what we really want to talk about is evolution. For those of you, and I know some of you have experienced, for the last couple of years, we've done this event called Tofu Disrupt. Of course, we're in Silicon Valley, we're in the Bay Area, we can call anything disrupt, so why not Tofu Disrupt? And the idea is really just to get your attention and to really introduce tofu in ways that perhaps you haven't thought of. So we've done that in San Francisco at the San Francisco Cooking School. Woohoo! You're here. Yes. And then thank you, Jody. That was our first one. The second one we did was in New York City, and that was amazing out there. So we have now disrupted the market as a company, and what we want to talk about now is evolution. Where does it go? So that's what tonight is about. And you talk a lot about food and evolution. So as we proceed with the demo, I would love for you to sort of interrupt, ask questions about evolutions, the science behind it.
It's okay if I disrupt instead?
Disrupt too, yeah. Part of what I'm going to try to do is really to show you how tofu evolves from liquid to solid and the entire spectrum. Why am I trying to show you that? Well, first I'm sitting next to a food scientist, and I'm a tofu food geek. I don't know beyond tofu. The second reason is I think in debusting some of the myths of tofu, you will become a better tofu eater and a better tofu chef at home. So that's our goal. Tofu, fortunately, has gotten a better reputation because of our interest in eating more plant-based food. So we jokingly call tofu the original plant-based food because it's been around for a long, long, long time. But I also like to think of tofu as a very new food, a food that if you didn't know anything about tofu, if Bill Shirtleff didn't introduce tofu in the 70s here, and I'm introducing you for the first time to tofu, you might think of it as a really amazing plant-based food. And it really depends on how I explain it to you.
One of the interesting things, and I think the mapo tofu example was maybe representative of this, is that I think tofu has been extremely misunderstood in the U.S. Because it was introduced in the 70s, but most people eating it think of it as a meat alternative, as something that vegetarians eat, which is not really how it's seen in Asia. And in particular, like when I was growing up, we ate mapo tofu, which is tofu with beef or tofu with pork, and we just thought of it as another ingredient, another thing that was cooked and that we ate, and it was never really something that was an alternative to eating chicken or an alternative to eating fish or beef or anything like that. So I think for a lot of people who grew up in the U.S., their idea of what tofu is and what it can be is pretty skewed in that sense. And you'll see a lot of recipes online and a lot of recipes in books attempt to take tofu and transform it into a meat or like a meaty thing, or use it in meat-based recipes, which can be successful, but for me it's much more of an ingredient to be enjoyed for its own merits, which are very different from the merits that actual meat offers.
That's true. So before we launch into the demo, I want to read a quote by Kenji. If you haven't bought his book, I love this quote, and I think it really represents tonight. He said, "Challenge everything all the time, so ask questions. Taste everything at least once, so unless you have allergies, try everything. And the last one, which I love, is relax, it's only pizza. In this case, relax, it's only tofu, okay? We can get all intellectual about it, but at the end of the day, I hope that you're just gonna enjoy this delicious food. So, shall we head over?
Yeah. Okay, so what do we got here?
So, we got the camera and the lights on, and hopefully you'll see it there soon. So what I have here is a whole setup of 2 pots of soy milk. I have soybeans right here. These are mature, dry soybeans. This is the same beans that's been eaten for thousands and thousands of years, a legume. In front of me, I have several types of what we call young Yuba. And this is actually from Kyoto.
Awesome.
I learned about it from Kyoto. I went there 2 summers ago and managed to talk my way into the oldest Yuba and tofu shops there.
So for people who don't know, Yuba is the skin that forms on the top when you boil tofu. It's like when you make Jello and you get that like layer of skin at the top that is the best part of the Jello, right?
Right.
Or the skin on the pudding
milk.
cup. Yeah.
So that's what this is. The reason this is important is this is the beginning of my lesson about texture. So I'm cutting open what we call Yuba number 1. Hopefully I can show you how we're going to harvest them pretty soon. As this soy milk boil. Oops. See? Technical difficulty. Here we go. I didn't want this to overheat.
Okay.
So the first Yuba, the Japanese calls it kumiage, which means scoop. Why are they calling it scoop Yuba? Because it's super creamy. You can't pick it up. So I'm going to squeeze it out here. It's the closest thing to our burrata cheese. And many people...
It's like the cream of the soy milk.
The cream of the soy milk. High protein, high fat. Can you guys see that?
Do you know what is the actual like protein and fat breakdown in soy milk?
So this is what you're looking at here in Yuba is anywhere between 50 to 55% protein.
Okay.
So it's mostly protein. The soybeans themselves that we source are super high protein already. Mm-hmm. So when we use the super high protein soybeans, the soy milk is much thicker. So we're going to harvest that in a minute. The next one, this is probably the most popular Yuba for sashimi. So in Asia, in Japan in particular, you can go, the meal that you're talking about, you probably have eaten several stages of this. In this stage, oops, I should have worn an apron. We were talking about that. In this stage, it's beginning to form sheet. This is, in Japanese, it's called sumami, which means pinch. It's just soft enough for you to pinch it. I'm going to try to do that here as well.
So when you're making, so right now we're heating up soy milk.
Yes.
There's proteins coagulating. Is that what's going on here?
Actually, the protein and the fat will rise to the top.
Got it. And then it'll coagulate there, and then
and then we harvest it.
Got it. And as you continue to boil it, you get firmer and firmer.
Right. So that's a great question. So if I don't harvest it, it will get firmer and firmer and firmer. So this is sort of like the first harvest. This is the second harvest. We package this in milk, you can see. Now, the difference, I'm sorry you don't get to taste this. One, you can pick it up at the farmer's market, but the difference is this actually is beginning to, you can see, you can play around with
sheets
it.
You can roll up.
It's kind of like a sheet-like thing, and it actually has a nice bite. When it's between your teeth, you actually hear the little click when you bite onto it. So this is the second texture. Yeah, I know. You want to eat the whole thing. You have a towel there. And then the third one is now what we call the hikiage, which is the yuba that you can truly harvest with your hand. Okay? And it's a little bit thicker than that.
And how big are your pots?
Oh,
when
great.
you harvest it?
So if you go online, you'll see our tofu trays are about 2 feet by 1 foot. So we make sheets of it. And
that's smaller than I thought.
Yeah, but we have like 80 of them running at the same time. So we can make a lot of yuba.
What temperature are we looking for here?
We're looking for about 180. There you have it.
So we're like
we can drop that a little bit.
Now?
You have to turn it off and then on again, and then there we go. All right, actually that one's working much better. You want to harvest our first yuba?
Sure.
Oh, wait, I brought the chopsticks. Let me go grab them.
This is my first yuba harvest.
Here's some chopsticks.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can pull it up so the folks can see.
You want to do yours and I'll do mine?
Yeah, mine hasn't formed yet. So.
Okay.
So Kenji's going to harvest our first yuba. So we've gone from liquid to different stages of solids. There you go.
Look at that.
I know, I love this part because it's kind of like delivering a baby. Everyone's like, Wait till I make tofu, it's a bigger baby.
It is just like the skin on a pudding cup.
You actually
Can I
should eat it. Yes. That's
It's delicious.
You can tell the audience what it tastes like.
It tastes really good.
So that is somewhere between the first and the second.
Yeah, it tasted actually pretty similar to.
Yeah,
to
did
this
it have
one.
a little bite?
A little bit of bite. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if we didn't harvest that, that will get firmer and firmer, and then we'll get what we call the third Yuba. So unfortunately, Yuba is sort of a dying art. We make Yuba, we introduced it because I just love eating it so much. And the irony about Yuba is there's only one way to make it, which is this way. You just have to wait. You can't hurry it up. It's kind of like harvesting the cream of milk. You can't make milk, the cream rise any faster. Mm-hmm. So as we harvest, we're going to have less and less protein. The milk's going to drop, and then we basically run out of protein and fat.
And what can you do with that milk after?
Well, we don't waste it. So that milk we use in a lot of our recipes. Like in our burger, mm-hmm. we actually don't use any binder. We use the soy milk to mix with the tofu to bind the patty. So that's an example.
Could you use it in like so like when you're making cheese and you coagulate protein out of it and you
mm-hmm.
you have the whey that's left, like you can use it. It works great in like bread recipes and things like that. Can you make
you can
spent soy milk bread?
You can absolutely do that. In fact, that's going. How come yours is? You must be standing next to a better pot. Mine's beginning to form.
Yeah, I see a little
I'm gonna let this form too. So there's the soy milk that has lost the cream and the protein, so it's sticky. We don't use that to make bread, but we probably could. I've never tried. The whey of tofu, on the other hand, actually does not have as much protein as the whey of cheese.
Okay.
So it's mostly water. And when we make tofu, which we're going to make soon, it's ironic because what I need to do is I need to add water into this soybeans to hydrate it, right? And then once I'm done, I ground it, I make a wet, like 90% water silken tofu, and then I break it up, and then I push the water out to make a firm tofu. So I add water, and then I lose water. So it's kind of a waste, but there's nothing we can do about it. All right, here's more Yuba.
Can you do this with other nut milks? Like
you can. You can do this with any milk that has high fat and high protein. So cashew, and so it just happened. You can do it with other types of beans as well. It just takes longer. So
I think I got a layer here.
Go for it. Yeah. I know you probably have questions. Write it on a piece of paper. I promise to answer them. You can catch me and Kenji. Oh, see? That's like number 2.
Yeah, this looks a little...
Yeah, or no, yeah. So now you have a bite. I'm going to let my form. So as Kenji eats and eats, I'll keep talking. The one I'm trying to get formed here is...
number 3?
It's number 3 and number 4, which I have here. What you're familiar with, and you can get at the supermarket, is our number 4 Yuba, which is in a form of a sheet or a noodle. So you can see this all over the place. But what's neat about this is you've been eating it probably in a lot of Chinese restaurants in a dry form for a long time. The reason you sell it dry is because it can last longer. You can leave it there for weeks and months.
And then you just rehydrate it before.
Right. You probably had it.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but we were the first one to make these fresh Yuba, and this is a very elastic, high protein, chewy sheet that you can use as a wrap. But we also cut it up
into noodles.
And you can actually taste the dish. It's going to get served soon. That's going to have it, and we'll have the chef out. So that's Yuba. So very easily, it's important for me to show this because just like that, without doing anything, I already have several texture. Like if you think about it in terms of cheese, it's very similar. You go from soft cheese to slightly firmer cheeses. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to dive into tofu making.
And one thing I think is also interesting is that in the U.S., I think people tend to like crunchy. Like I think the U.S. likes brown and crunchy more than almost anyone else in the world. Maybe Germans like it just as much.
Yeah.
Whereas in Asia, like texture is something that's I think thought about almost as much as flavor. And so the idea of having like slippery textures or what, slimy textures, which sound like off-putting, I think, to Westerners. But it's like the firmness of foods is something that is
Actually,
varied a lot,
point.
and something that is sought after. I think those softer textures.
And I think that's one of the challenge of tofu here as well. Some people don't eat tofu simply because the texture is
because it can be a little slimy, or
yeah,
it can be
or chalky or custardy or something. So the same challenge applies here, but fortunately for us, we have a lot of innovative chefs. You're going to taste their food tonight, and what they've done, it's really amazing. They've taken an ingredient that we produce, and we show them how we produce it, and then using the culinary background, they come up with amazing dishes. And that's the best part for me, is I get to eat what they come up with. And they really understand the markets and the customers much more than I do.
Oh, right.
Yeah, this is happening.
Nice and
I don't know whether,
there.
it's hard for you to see from there. I cannot invite all of you up here, so. But the next thing I'm gonna do is—
It's wrinkled, it's like old man skin, right?
Yeah, you can describe. That's a good one. That's a good one. I never thought of it. It's gonna get older.
Like old man who spent too much time in the sun.
The sun, there you go. There you go. I'm gonna leave it and let it form. In the meantime, we're moving into a totally different category. So remember I said it's like cheese making. Tofu is very similar in that regard. This is just the cream of the soy milk. We're gonna move into cheese making. That's your last chance for you, because I'm gonna use that milk. So in cheese making—
How many of these sheets will you harvest off of a single batch?
This is half a gallon of soy milk. I'm guessing that I can probably get roughly around half a pound of Yuba from it over the course of—
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's quite a bit. Because again, it's a much thicker soy milk.
So it's essentially, you'll get like essentially this much out of half a gallon.
Half a gallon.
Good amount.
So
42 grams of protein.
yeah, I know, as much protein as a lot of meat. But so tofu, we use a coagulant instead of a rennet. And I have in my hand gypsum. You have it in your house, but this is actually a mineral, food grade, harvest in a mine in the southwest of the United States. Why do we use gypsum? That's your question. Why do we use gypsum?
Well, there's a couple different. I mean, there's a couple different coagulants you can use, right? There's gypsum, and then there's the Japanese one.
Nigari.
Nigari, yeah.
Right. So gypsum.
Can you tell about the difference? Yeah.
I can. This you can see a little bit because I can bring it to the camera. As you can see, gypsum is a powder mineral that I'm stirring in a pot of water. Ooh, no. It's not clear, which is what I want to show you. It's kind of creamy looking. It's because the powder, gypsum, the mineral, it's not it's not soluble. So you cannot dissolve it prior to mixing it.
It looks like construction dust, which it basically is. Right?
Food grade, Kenji. Yeah. Food grade. Safe to eat. And this is where your maybe we should let you make the silken tofu.
Okay.
Let's try that. This is your dessert he's going to make, by the way. So if he bombs, you get no dessert. So this is the reason the Chinese use this is because it's abundant and it's cheap. And more importantly, it does not mask the flavor of tofu. In the US, we try to mask the flavor of the soybean.
Often, yeah.
Often. So, but
is there a difference in texture you get with gypsum versus nigari?
You don't get a difference in texture, but you get a difference in flavor. Let me talk about nigari. Nigari is a Japanese coagulant. Why do the Japanese use nigari, otherwise known as sodium chloride, as a coagulant? It's because there was no gypsum in Japan. Yeah. It's that simple.
Yeah, and it's harvested from the ocean, correct?
Right.
And
so
there's a lot of ocean in Japan.
Yes, lots of ocean, and nigari is a byproduct of sea salt. So there's an abundance of nigari. Another term for nigari is called bittern. So because of the chlorine, it's slightly bitter. So nigari tofu has a bit of a bitterness, but also a sweetness to it. So that's why the Japanese uses it. But both coagulate really well.
What temperature are we looking for here?
Good question as a scientist. So to make tofu, and this is where I was looking forward to, because when I read your book, you're talking about atoms bouncing around,
Right.
molecules, heat.
Yes.
This is it. So the reason we heat up the soy milk is for those heat atoms to be bouncing all over the place to mix with the coagulant. So now I have to re-stir the coagulant.
Okay.
I'm going to pour it in this bowl.
All right.
Okay.
And how much do you have here right now?
So this is 2 ounces of coagulant.
And mixed with?
Mixed with just about 2 ounces, maybe 3 ounces of water.
Of water, okay.
And the water is not that critical because...
it gets pressed out.
Yes, exactly. So now in this bowl,
All right.
you see...
So far, this is exactly what I did the time it completely failed. So.
You're standing next to a tofu master who fakes it, so we're good. So here's the trick, as far as I know.
Okay.
Let me remove that. The trick...
So we're at like around 175, 180
175 and 80 F is the perfect temperature to make it. The trick is you might have to hold it with 2 hands.
Okay.
It's not hot. When you pour this, as soon as you start, you're gonna keep pouring a just straight stream until you finish the milk.
Okay.
So
no stirring or anything?
No stirring on. So the pouring is the stirring in itself. So
Got it.
this is where the art comes in. So the hardest tofu to make is the softest tofu. So he's going to make the softest tofu, and yeah.
So just pour.
Once you start,
right.
pour about this high.
This high?
Yeah,
All right.
go for it.
Once
Right
I
in the
start, don't
center,
stop?
and don't stop. Keep going, keep going. Yeah, that's it. Keep going, straight like that, all the way until you ran out of milk. I think he did great. Oh, he's doing the circle. Now I can't guarantee it.
I knew I was going to screw that up. All right.
So now we can turn that off.
All right. Now we just
Now
wait.
we just wait.
Okay.
So
Do
you
we
guys
tell jokes,
eat.
or-
We tell jokes. I don't know when the next dish is coming out because we have a chef coming.
And so
You don't have-
it's my instinct to like touch this now or like jiggle it to see how it's doing. I should not do that.
we can
probably.
wait 5 more seconds. This is where patience comes in.
Just 5 seconds.
Just
okay.
5 seconds. So what we have here, and we'll show it to you. Oh, you can see it pretty well. If Kenji did a great job, which I think he did, with his own technique, this will be a jello-y like tofu. And this is our dessert.
You can see it? Yeah, you can see it setting. Huh?
While we wait, let me harvest the big tofu, the big Yuba. So as you might not have seen, but I'm going to use my hand because I don't need the chopstick anymore. So this, my friend, is the sheet. Ta-da.
Oh, awesome.
So I have to tell a funny story. Some of you may know a really great chef called Daniel Patterson who opened the restaurant Qua. So Daniel, 10 years ago, wanted to work with Yuba. So I met with him and he loved it. He was obsessed about Yuba. He wrote a piece in the New York Times. We had like one table and I had 20 phone calls within an hour of that Sunday when that piece came out in the magazine. And I didn't have any Yuba to sell to anybody. So that was a hard lesson on PR there.
Hey, every time you say Yuba, so I had a dog named Yuba. So every time you say
Yes, you
every
did.
time you say Yuba,
It's one of your taste testers.
she was the taste tester for the first place.
Right. But here's the story. The story was Daniel, one time on a weekend, said, Minh, I really needed some Yuba. I'm taking it to Paris for an event. And I said, we're not open on the weekend. I can't make Yuba for you. And he said, no, I really need it. So I said, I have some soy milk, so I can try to make it at home. And he needed 3 pounds of Yuba. So imagine the number of pots I had at home, harvesting like an ounce at a time. It took me like 6 hours to make 3 pounds
Were
of
you like
Yuba.
watching Netflix or something while you're
No,
doing it?
I'm like one pot, another pot. But I made it, and he was very grateful. So Yuba.
Nice.
All right, now you can jiggle it.
Okay.
Ah, look at that.
Oh,
Give
yeah,
him
that
a
jiggles.
round of applause, people.
Can we scoop and taste?
You can. Yeah, here's what
Yeah.
I'm gonna do. I'm gonna rinse this spoon, and you
right.
can taste it. And you can describe it.
Oh wow! Look at that. So
So-
I mean, it really is just like a very soft custard.
A very soft custard tofu. It's very hot, so be careful.
Yeah, it's awesome. It melts on your tongue the way like sea urchin does, you know. But,
Uni, yes.
Yeah.
It serves great with uni. So if you want to eat fresh stuff, you have to be a moderator at my next event, okay? So
Or you can order gypsum on Amazon, right?
You cannot order gypsum on Amazon.
I don't know what I use.
You can get it at a Lowe's or any construction shop, but not at Amazon. But I wouldn't use those. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to destroy our dessert. Okay. We actually have made some back there, and I'm going to use it to make tofu. So go ahead.
So all right. So this is silken tofu, right?
Yes.
But I've had silken tofu that comes in varying degrees of firmness.
Yes.
I always thought that it was a matter of how much water you remove from it after you make it. Is that the case, or is there something else going on there?
No, I think this is why we have you here. That's a great. In fact, what you've eaten, it's the softest form of silken tofu.
Right.
If you just leave this alone until tomorrow, it's going to be firmer. You're going to see a layer of water on top. And this is the science behind it. This is essentially the bind of the coagulant.
I mean, you can actually even see water already kind of leaching out into the crater there.
Yeah. So, and we're gonna show that more. Actually, here's what you can do. You can mess around and break that up with this spoon, and then I can talk about that. Yeah. You can mush it as you. Yeah. So what Kenji is doing is essentially breaking the curd to make cheese. It's very similar to separate the whey and the protein.
I think am I cheddaring this right now? I think that's what
I don't know. Is that the right term?
I think that's
what I'm doing is I have this little beautiful wooden tofu box. This you can get on Amazon, and I'm not getting a cut. And this is the cheesecloth that we use.
I have one of these at home that I use to store other things in after my failed tofu experiment.
Now you can get we'll send you home with some coagulant and soy milk. You're a pro now.
Right.
So. And as you can see, look at all this water.
Yeah, lots of
liquid.
Liquid just pouring out.
I can bring it over here to show you.
Okay,
it's
wait.
not so creamy anymore. See, you see all that liquid? Yeah. So.
I have another question for you.
Yes.
So when you buy tofu in the little Tetra packs, is that tofu coagulated directly inside those packs, or are they coagulating it somewhere in there? Because it always looks like it takes exactly the shape of the pack. And if so, how do they make different levels of firmness for silken tofu inside those packs if no water can get out?
So you asked, this is a question of science for sure. So until the invention of a coagulant called glutenyl delta lactone, GDL, you cannot sell silken tofu in the grocery store because if you jiggle it during transport, it's going to fall apart. Okay? GDL is a coagulant, a synthetic coagulant, that you can actually use. And if you look at the backpack of most tofu, it's a combination of GDL and calcium sulfate. It's instant coagulation. Okay. So what you do is for the Tetra Pak, you inject the soy milk and GDL in at the same time until it's completely filled and seal it.
And then to get varying degrees of firmness, is that varying amounts of coagulant in there that you're adding?
No, actually the firmness, you can only make tofu so. The firmness of tofu has to do with the amount of water it leaches.
Right.
So to make you cannot make a firm silken tofu. You can make a chalky silken tofu. So if you overdo with the coagulant, it's not going to get firmer. Okay. Actually, it is going to get firmer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I've seen varying levels of firmness.
It's firmer in a chalky way because now you have too much of it.
Right.
Right? It's not so silky, but it is firmer in terms of actual amount of H2O in there.
Right.
Yeah. So, but here, what we're going to do next is I'm going to scoop the tofu into this little, you can help me. And we'll show you what all the liquid that's out. Again, what I'm doing here, and the reason I have to do it at this point is the temperature of this silken tofu is still roughly about 150 degrees. So what I'm doing is I'm forcing the tofu to rebind, recoagulate the second time. So the first time it coagulates is with the calcium sulfate in here. Right. Now I'm pressing it to rebind it into a block.
Got it. So it binds first, and then it pretty easily kind of shears apart into these larger curds. But then you're saying now the proteins are going to rebind to each other a second time?
The second time because there's still coagulant in here.
Got it.
Yeah. And as you can see, there's not a lot. This is pretty clear whey. So
I mean, it is just like making cheese.
It is very similar to making cheese.
Should we just put it all in?
I wouldn't pour the water in.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Check on the time. How are the dumplings, by the way? Yeah? Henry, you see him, big Asian guy. He's a great chef. We just promoted Henry to be our community manager, so he's gonna throw together a lot of these events, and he makes great dumplings. So I haven't tried them yet, but ginger scallion chimichurri. Chimichurri, yeah, I know. We gotta get some. Yep, with tofu. So, all right. So now I'm gonna fold it like an envelope, and then you're gonna get to press it because I'm not that strong. You need a lot of weight. I'm not.
What are you trying to say here?
You got muscle. I always
just push down.
Yeah. So so you can put like a lot of weight on it, or since we don't have a lot of time, and we can go sit and drink.
Free labor.
Yeah, exactly. So as you can see, a lot of liquid's coming out, and we're reforming. We use, when we had more space, we did a tofu making class, and it's exactly like this, and everyone gets to go home with the kit.
And do we want to pour this?
Yeah, you can tip it. You can hold it.
Hold it from the
yeah,
bottom.
and then tip it and pour the water. Ta-da! And then put it back and press some more. I'm gonna check on this. I can't see anybody, but yeah, great. Next dish.
It's out.
It's out. Oh, oops. So where's our chef?
Are you ready for him?
Yeah, we can talk to Nick. I'm sorry, Tui. This can wait. So you guys have had the second dish already? And we still haven't eaten anything. How is the second dish that Nick made? Yeah, all right.
Can you use this? Can you reuse this liquid to grind more, to soak more soybeans? Like, is there any benefit to?
You can, but and in Vietnam we actually let this ferment to use it as a coagulant to make sour tofu.
Okay.
But in the U.S., our food safety, it's so paramount that as much as there's a lot of way we conserve water, but this is one of the water has gone through a different temperature change, and you know about germs and food safety. So once it comes out, we don't really use it. We can't really reuse it.
Skincare products, maybe.
Skincare, yes. Yeah, there's probably some chemicals in here nutrition's in here that's very useful. There's Nick. Yay! Give us a round of applause. Come on up. Hey,
hi guys.
Have a seat. So you guys just had Nick's dish. What do you guys think? Do you want to tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind it?
So it's, I don't think this dish has ever existed before exactly like this, and it probably never will again. So we have a Central European restaurant called DUNA. I come from a Japanese cooking background, though I had a lot of Japanese restaurants over the years, and this is kind of an amalgamation of Central Europe, Japan, and some other things. It's vegan, but it has a lot of the flavors of paprikash, which is a kind of classic Hungarian dish. It's usually chicken, but sometimes with vegetables, lots of Hungarian paprika. In this case, we used Yuba noodles from Hodo. It's one of our favorite products we've had ever. It's just super delicious. We put sunflower tahini on it, so it's a really kind of satisfying tahini sauce we use for a lot of different things. There's another texture of tofu that we froze it. It's a kind of a fun way to get a kind of meaty texture out of tofu, freezing, and then we don't have a deep fryer, but we cooked it in grapeseed oil in a cast iron pan. And then finally, there's a sauce on top that's almost like sour cream, but it's made with only sweet potato, tofu, and grapeseed oil, a little bit of lime juice. Wow. And I think we might try to make a product out of that. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. We were just talking about that back there.
Veganese without...
The veganese, a cream, like some kind of guacamole you can spread on the bread. It's so yummy and so simple.
And there's mushrooms. There's a concentrated mushroom powder in there, in addition to our sunflower tahini. Kale that's cooked in the grapeseed oil that we used for the tofu. And then sunflower sprouts and a sunflower seed mix. So I like...
Sweet potato you said in there?
We use potato to bind a lot of different things. It's a good emulsifier, so we use a lot of sweet potato for sauces. Sometimes we do smoked potatoes or just roasted potatoes. Nice. It's a great way to thicken a sauce and kind of hold something, keep it from breaking.
That's awesome. I know you and Courtney, your partner, wrote the book on bar tartine. And I was reading it, and one of the quotes that I wanted to sort of get your reaction to, because we're talking about evolution. And in the book you said, we consider authenticity a slippery concept, as something that exists to evolve and be interpreted. So, at your restaurant, at DUNA, when people ask you, what do you serve? What do you tell them?
We like to serve, one of our main rules is we have to want to eat it. And once we don't want to eat it anymore, it comes off the menu because we feel like if we keep cooking something that we're not hungry for anymore, we kind of lose the passion behind it. And stuff changes even if you're consistent with recipes. So kind of consistency is our enemy. And we interpret things. So we we get inspired by traditional foods. We cook with what we have and what's available instead of kind of forcing preparations. We want to use what our farmers bring us, and we use a lot of ugly produce. We process a lot of stuff. We make everything from scratch. So there's no way for us to continue to follow one recipe consistency. So we're constantly evolving and constantly changing.
That sounds like it takes a lot of work.
I've tried it the other way. It's like, I don't know if it's the ADHD or what, but Courtney's the same way.
Well, this is unbelievably beautiful and delicious.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you for
Thanks
coming
for
up.
having me.
Yeah, no, I love your restaurant. Yeah.
We love your product.
Yeah. If you really want to eat new stuff all the time, go to Nick's restaurant, DUNA. It's like you just don't know what's going to be on the menu, and it's always delicious.
We don't always
but also sometimes old stuff, like stuff that's been sitting around and fermenting for a while. Right?
And you do a lot of fermentation, so it's amazing.
We use ingredients that are somewhere 6-7 years old, long aged, in a good way.
Does
in a
that
good way.
sometimes. Yeah.
That's
Thanks,
fantastic.
guys.
Thank you
Appreciate
so much.
It. Thank you, folks.
Yeah, Ralph. Thank you. Yeah. All right. In the interest of time, I don't know when the next dish is coming up, but we should wrap this up. Yeah.
All right.
I know, right? See, we
so
have too much fun. So are we going to end up
with something like this? Is that
not quite that firm? Not quite that firm, but
you need a bigger guy for that.
We need a bigger guy for that. Good point. All right, so I just took the lid off. Okay. I want to bring this whole thing over here in a bath of water.
And the reason you put it in a bath of water is because?
Well, usually it's so soft that you might break it, so the water helps
kind of cushion it.
Cushion it, and also you want to start chilling it right away unless you intend to eat it warm.
Right.
The third reason is the cheesecloth being wet is easier to unfold.
Okay.
So it doesn't stick to the tofu, so you have a silkier surface.
Got it. But when you buy tofu, like if you go to the Chinese market and you want to buy tofu out of those sort of bulk bins, it's always stored in water there also. But you can buy firm tofu or soft tofu or medium tofu, whatever, and it's all stored in water. Why doesn't, if what we're doing right here is basically trying to get the water out.
Right.
Why doesn't the water go back in once you put the tofu in there?
Most of the tofu you buy come in a tub, and the reason for that is you cannot see the water in there, but the water actually changes color from clear to yellow to green.
Right.
It's just actually a way to prevent the tofu from going bad.
Got it.
So that piece of tofu, if it's been over any course of time, there's contamination and fermentation and bacteria and whatnot. So to keep it in water is one way to keeping it fresh longer.
Got it. So, but if you put like firm tofu in water, will water is there any exchange of liquids from inside the tofu to the water itself?
No, there's exchange of tofu water out into the liquid, but not liquid inside.
Right.
To do that, to actually get that liquid to change, you actually need heat. So
got it. And this is why like marinades actually don't
Don't work.
that well on tofu.
Yeah.
Well, unless you have a specific, Nick was talking about like freezing tofu, which can sort of make it a little more porous, or there's certain like fried tofu where you get a little bit more airspace in there that
Exactly.
marinades can go into. But yeah, like a lot of vegetarian recipes will have you sort of marinate the tofu. And this is actually the case with meat as well, that marinades are actually sort of more of a surface treatment than an actual, than anything that's going to travel into it. Like you can do this experiment at home. Like you can take a piece of meat or even a piece of tofu and put it, say, like in a cup of soy sauce, and then the next day cut it open, and you'll see that like the soy sauce has maybe penetrated like a millimeter or two into it, but you're still in the middle. You still just have plain old tofu.
And, but people don't get that, and when they experience tofu for the first time, they're really disappointed, especially if once the flavor of the surface is gone, and you don't actually have a tofu that's yummy.
Right, and you're left with something bland in the center.
Exactly. Right. All right, so we can have a drink afterwards. I like talking to you.
I thought we already started.
Yeah, we started. So now this tofu is in a bath of water. Can you see? Oh, good. And I'm just unwrapping it like a block of cheese. Trying to do it so you can see it. Oh, look at that. Wow. And, I need to baby this guy a little bit. Voila. This is kind of like, this is when people get excited. They made 2 pounds of tofu.
I mean,
there you go.
It looks like tofu.
Can you guys see? Oh, you can't really see that well. Let's see. And this is still very delicious. Can you see? There it is. It's kind of like magic. A block of soft tofu. Kenji's going to get to eat it again. Actually, why don't we take it out on here and cut it up?
Okay.
Here's a cutting board. You can take that out. Okay. We can leave all that in here, so you can see.
We can pretend I just washed my hands carefully.
You can pretend, yeah. You can put the board on top and then,
and then flip it over?
Yeah, and flip it over if you want. Boop. Voila. Good job. And do we have a knife? No.
No, we got.
We can use the back. We can use
this side. All right. Wow.
That's like art.
Yeah, it looks like tofu.
Yes.
I guess it is tofu.
Please, yes. Looks like tofu, it smells like tofu, it must taste like tofu. What do you taste? A little nutty?
A little nutty,
creamy?
a little sweet.
Yep.
A little creamy. I mean, super fresh.
Not tofu.
Yeah.
All right. We'll move on. But this is actually a good segue into James' dish because he's using textures. James, everybody. Thank you.
Actually, Nick brought some with him onto the stage.
He's a much better man. Well,
good point.
So, tofu.
Yes. Have you grew up eating tofu, James?
I definitely grew up eating tofu. I love it. I mean, it's, I grew up eating tofu not as like a meat substitute. It was like its own separate thing. That's how I remember tofu, actually. And to this day, that's how I consider tofu, as not a substitution. It's as it was like, a different protein and not, instead of, it's tofu, beef, chicken, pork. It's like, it's not a category. It's not a substitution for either or. It's its own separate texture, flavor profile. I snack on it like raw, actually, just like the way it is. It's just like, my kids love it too, so.
Right. So you see tofu from your background and your upbringing, but you've also trained in Europe with among the best restaurants out there, Western, classical training. You have sort of a couple of Asian restaurants, and you also have a 2-star Michelin restaurant, Commis. Talk about evolution. How, in your view, how do you see tofu as both sort of an artisan, traditional food, as well as a food of today?
as an artisan, let's say Commis, for
Yes.
example, I look at tofu as a ingredient of texture, as an ingredient of versatile. Because I'm in fine dining, it's also I use that as, allergy substitutions or dietary preferences. But at many times tofu, we use it. We don't even really consider like the dietary restrictions or not. It's like, this dish needs something. Dairy is kind of too strong for this dish. Tofu is a little bit more elegant, more subtle, but you still get the creaminess and the richness of it. So we think about it at that way. That's how we approach tofu at Commis. Where, like I say, Hawk Affair, it's a fabric of Asian cuisine, and you can't deny that. And there's specific tofu dishes. And you can't substitute meat for tofu. Like people think it's not really reversible. We could substitute
There's
chicken.
no silken beef, right?
Exactly.
Silken beef.
So,
Expensive. Silken beef would be quite expensive. I'll try to make it.
so that's my role, my approach to tofu on both ends.
So, for those of you who haven't read James' book, it's a great book because he really talks about his journey to America. It's very personal. And I couldn't help it. I have to ask you this question because in there, he talks about the making of lab, the dish you're making. Back in Isan, northern Thailand, Laos, where he came from. And this is a quote. He said, they're always macho about making lab, especially the raw version, the men, full of testosterone, a bonding event for manly brotherhood. You just made a tofu lab. How macho do you feel?
Actually, pretty macho, actually. I had to hand grate 50 pounds of tofu. Oh, by the way, the lob on the flat plate is vegan. The one in the bowl is made with fermented fish and fish sauce. Just to be aware. I'm not sure if it's
How macho is the lob?
Yeah, lab is one of those things where it's a protein dish. Duck, water buffalo, chicken, and why not tofu? Tofu is protein. It's not a vegetable. The texture and the appearance of it, you probably think it's chicken.
So when you're making a dish like the lob, which I wish I was tasting right now, how do you think about working with the tofu in order to adapt its texture, or how do you think about the tofu in a dish like this?
In a dish like lob, you definitely a texture. You don't want something that's too mushy or too watery. What's meant to be picked up in the functionality of the dish. Because lob you usually eat with, sticky rice or a leaf of lettuce and cucumber. And also it has to chew. Texture is a very important element in Asian food as well. So I had to hit all those points, and picking the right tofu for the dish was very important. If I picked anything that was, softer, it would be more diluted and watery. It would weep out water. But this, and from far away, take a picture of it and tell them it's chicken or catfish, they'll probably believe you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent.
You guys, I wish you can see it with the light that we see. Every dish up here is so beautiful. Yeah. Sorry you can't take pictures for Instagram.
Why is the lob all blue?
Yeah.
So, I guess one of the interesting things about doing the tofu in a dish like this is that you're breaking it down so that you have a lot more surface area, so that
Yes.
when we were tasting the tofu up there, the tofu obviously has a flavor of its own, and it's a pretty subtle flavor. But by breaking it down, and also what Nick did with his dish with the Yuba, which comes in thin sheets, you get a lot more surface area.
Right.
So you get a lot more. You have the ability to introduce a lot more flavors to it than you would with versus say a lot of people will take tofu and marinate it and grill it or bake it, and then you run into that problem where you have flavor on the outside, and then if you're not using great tofu, you have nothing in the middle.
Right. And I think that's the challenge of how tofu was introduced, the commodity tofu.
Because people think of it as it's the protein, so it has to be thick like a steak, right? As opposed to, I think, ways that it's very much traditionally eaten. Some traditions eat it in big blocks as well,
Right.
But frequently it's done something more like this, where it's chopped or it's cut, and it's done with a lot of other flavorful ingredients that add another dimension to it.
I know that my favorite dish at your new restaurant, Mockingbird, is our tofu dish called Mockingbird. He wanted to charge me money for if I want to use that name, Mockingbird. But it's basically a chunk of our firm tofu. I don't know what batter you use, but it's so delicious.
We actually brine it
You brine it?
for 24 hours.
Oh, so I have to confess, his opening day, I went and I ate the fried tofu sandwich, and it was so soft and creamy. I went back to the kitchen, and James is busy back there, and I said, James, I guess you didn't use our tofu. And he looked at me, and he's like, what are you talking about? And I said, you use a softer, creamier tofu. And he said, dude, I just went there to pick up this morning your tofu. And he pulled out a whole tray of our tofu, and I felt so embarrassed that I wrote him an email. I'm sorry, dude. You did magic to our tofu. But thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Your dish is beautiful and delicious.
Thank you.
All right. And we'll wrap up here.
All right.
If you're not eating the third dish already. You are? No? Kim's dish?
You're done with the third dish.
Awesome. Yeah, we're so slow. Sorry, Tui. Sorry. Here's what we're talking about when we talk about texture. These are fried tofu that I'm not allowed to do up here because of food, fire safety. But this is basically these tofu, firm tofu that we fry, and you can't see it very well, but we make it spongy. So what we do, if I were able to fry this tofu, what you'll see is the tofu, when I drop it in the oil, it's gonna be at the bottom, and over the course of time, slowly, the water matrix in that block will evaporate, and then the tofu will flow to the top. And that's when the inside is a sponge. And we basically, you can take this and put in a soup, you can marinate it in pretty much any sauce you want.
And then at that point, it'll actually absorb things, because there's all the holes and free space in there.
Right. The other thing you can do is you can freeze this and then thaw it again.
Right, which is what Nick was talking about. And it actually ends up with a sort of like you freeze it, and when you thaw it, all this liquid comes out of it, and you end up with a sort of spongy texture without the fried surface on the outside.
That's right.
Like it permanently changes the texture of it.
Exactly. The only difference between frying and freezing, you get the same matrix. However, the frozen tofu is much more elastic, much more chewy. Whereas a fried tofu, because of the second heat, it's a little softer and less chewy than the frozen tofu. But both are great ways to use in soups. So buy tofu, just, use oil at about actually not even 300, 250, just drop medium or firm tofu and just leave it. And they're gonna float. You won't burn it because.
And you were telling me earlier, it's
you
neat,
won't burn it.
You don't even have to flip it over, because what happens is it floats to the top, and then as the bottom fries, all the liquid comes out of it, and then it becomes lighter, so it flips itself over, and then the other side fries. And so you just put it in there.
You don't do
have to touch
anything,
it.
and your kids would love it. They can watch a fried block of tofu all night, because literally, like you put this down, it's gonna come down this way. And then when the liquid here has evaporated, the tofu will automatically turn by itself. And now the heavy part is at the bottom. And when that heavy part becomes lighter, it's going to turn again. Yeah. So the heavy is always going to be at the bottom, the light at the top. And so you have an evenly fried block of tofu if you just leave it alone for about half an hour.
Wild nights at the Tsai house.
Yeah, exactly. You just scoop it out, put it in soup, and you have it. Where's Kim? Yay, Kim, come on up. I know, we're keeping everybody late. Yay.
I gotta pick my dish.
You gotta go, yes.
Nice to meet you.
Come on up. So, want to tell us about your dish a little bit?
Sure. Super excited to be here and doing the entree tonight. So I got some tenderloin from Flannery because I really like adding protein with tofu. Having tofu kind of being a shining star, but putting other kind of proteins with it. I've worked with Minh a lot, so I like playing around with the okara, which is what's left over when you're making the soy milk. and I smoked it and kind of treated it like grits, I'd say. So there's gonna be a little bit of that on the plate. And then I miso cured some firm tofu, which seared, and then the tenderloin will rest on top of that. And then I made some pumpkin tofu. So I took his soy milk, which is the best soy milk ever, because the fat content's amazing in it, and added juiced pumpkin that I reduced with a little bit of honey and salt and egg, and kind of made a pumpkin tofu.
So, I know.
Don't get excited yet. Pressure.
I know. Like, if you can get a seat at her restaurant, Nightbird, you should. Small restaurant.
Please come by.
Yes. So, I've had the fortune of working with Kim for the third time. Kim actually anchored our very first Tofu Disrupt at San Francisco Cooking School. And then somehow we managed to talk you into leading a whole bunch of chefs to New York to do the second Tofu Disrupt in New York City last year.
Which was amazing.
That was really fun. And now we talked you back again.
It's not hard.
Yeah, good.
I'm a big fan.
I'm so happy that you're willing to come back. But as I was thinking about, having you play with the ingredient, it never occurred to me to ask you, when was your first experience with tofu?
Well, I grew up in kind of a hippie beach town where when we would go out and drink when we were kids, we'd go to the local place and get the mushroom
And eat
tofu
tofu.
burgers.
Yes.
And everyone probably thinks that's disgusting, but that's where I initially got it. But then it wasn't like the tofu that you make, or like the Yuba or anything that we play around with now. But at the time, I mean, there was just a ton of, it was like almost Cajun tofu, I'd say, that I went back a few months ago. It's not so awesome.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Laguna Beach, in Southern California, which I normally don't like to tell people. But then I think my very first event as a chef was I got paired with Minh for a farm dinner at one market,
Right.
7 or 8 years ago, and that's where I really got to start playing with his product, and I mean, it kind of blew my mind, and that's where I like to implement it in my cooking at the restaurant. Whether it was at past restaurants where I worked with Daniel, we went to Madrid and I did a whole dish based on all of your tofus and okara, and then at Nightbird as well. I love tofu.
We can call you the original gangster,
The OG
of Tofu Disrupt. So given that I didn't know about the burger story. That's a great story. I'm trying to think, now that you're a chef at a fine dining restaurant, how do you think, tofu has evolved in the U.S., given that you know us a little bit? Maybe you're slightly biased, but in your view, how has tofu evolved, and where should it evolve to, in your view?
Well, I mean, I think that you've been at the forefront at pushing tofu and teaching chefs about all the different ways that you can utilize it, like Brooks in New York, or having the Tofu Disrupts here and being able to use the soft, like the Nama Yubas, and then I can't even make Yuba unless I'm using your milk now because I can't even drink the other stuff now. And I just think that when your eyes get open, or our eyes as chefs or as people walking in a grocery store buying tofu products, with different varieties, you just get so creative. Different textures, different flavors, different everything is where you start evolving and thinking about how you can utilize the dish. Like the okara, it was something that used to get given to horses or to thrown away, and now there's a company making cookies out of it. Or I like to use it as like a grits or play around. Whenever you kind of discover something new, it's always exciting to see what you can make and just be kind of original, I guess.
Awesome.
You're talking about Brooks at Superiority Burger?
Yeah.
Who does a good vegetarian burger?
Totally.
Yeah.
And I mean, and there's a bunch of chefs in New York, and I mean in San Francisco, that utilize everything. I really love the soft yubas, the Nama yubas and stuff. It's so amazing.
So if you happen to be flying in here for this event from New York, when you go back, go to Superiority Burger.
Excellent.
This amazing geeky chef, Brooke Headley.
Pastry
chef.
Yeah.
He's a hard metal guitar band guy.
There are a lot of. It's really weird. There's a strong connection between the hardcore music scene and vegan food.
It's my favorite
It's
genre.
really strange.
Something there, guys.
Bill Corbett.
Right. And Brooks small restaurant, but whenever he wants, whatever he makes, he gets a write-up.
Yeah.
And it just blows people's perception mind
Yeah.
all the time. So we
Well,
just
he's
got to
using
get
great
him out here.
product. I know.
Yeah.
I'll reach
So-
out
And
to him.
he went from fine dining to making vegan burgers, which I guess is the
Yeah.
opposite of what you did.
Connection. Del Posto was amazing though when I went
Del
there,
Posto is
too.
awesome.
That's
But,
true.
Yeah, I just think that you offer, and I'm not just saying this because I like you and know you, but just you are so excited about the product that makes us excited about it to work with it, and that's where everything evolves.
Thank you.
I'm a fan.
Yay. Thank you. We'll
I'm
wrap
gonna go
up
cook
with
my
that.
dish.
We pay her nothing.
He does it.
Thank you
Thank you
so much.
I'm gonna
No.
go cook now.
All right.
Thank you.
So thank you for this list of questions. We'll try to answer as many of them as we can. Some of our answers might be long, so if we miss your questions, it's because we're thoughtful about the answers. I'm going to remind you guys more than once tonight that at the end of the evening, housekeeping, please fill out the evaluation form. That way, Kenji and I will still have a job after this gig. So please fill out the evaluation form. I know Kim's dish is coming out, you can eat while we talk about the dish. The beef tenderloin, squash tofu, and smoked okara. I'm sure, hopefully we'll get a dish.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, Kenji and I will dig into the questions. Here is one that we're going to start with, a softball.
Do you want me to read them to you? Because you're probably going to
No.
be giving most of the answers.
No, you're going to give the answer
I'll
to
just-
this one. I'm gonna have Kenji answer the first one.
Okay.
Curious about what you think about Impossible Meat and all the bloody veggie burger in particular. The huge amount of venture capital they have received. Told you it was a softball. All right, Kenji.
That doesn't seem like a softball. I don't know if I'm going to give the right answer in front of you now. I love their product.
There we go. No, talk about your restaurant.
I think it's great. I mean, I think honestly, like anything that gets people eating less meat is a move in the right direction right now.
You've had it. You've had the burger.
I've had it. Yeah, I've had the burger. I think it works great as a sort of thinner burger. We're actually using it at my restaurant.
Okay.
So we're using it we're making a vegan doner kebab.
Got
So
it.
we actually have like a doner kebab spinner. And we make a cone of meat out of the Impossible Meat stuff seasoned.
Oh, wow.
Bound with transglutaminase, and it cooks in front of a live fire and gets shaved off just like a real. I mean, I love this stuff. It's made with wheat protein, so it has a sort of weedy aftertaste. But once you mix it with like a bunch of, we use a bunch of Turkish spices. But once you mix it with spices or add toppings on a burger, I think it's pretty incredible how closely it mimics meat. And I mean, I'm interested to hear what you have to say about it because honestly, I don't see it as a competitor to to tofu because this is a product that is very specifically trying to imitate meat, right? It's something that people who became vegan for maybe ethical or environmental reasons, but who still love the taste of a hamburger, they can eat this burger and be like, oh, that's what I remember hamburgers tasting like. And I think that's great. Whereas tofu is not really a meat, as we've talked about. Tofu, it can be a meat substitute, but typically it's not. And I think that's not the way you want people to think about the tofu. But I mean, I'm interested to see what you hear about.
I'm
what you
happy to
think about
answer
it.
your question. So does it come to you in sort of like a ground beef form? And then you
So it
form
comes to
yourself?
us in 10-pound blocks
Got
that
it.
looks just like hamburger.
yeah.
It looks like ground beef, and it behaves very much like ground beef. I think you can also get it shipped in patty form.
Yeah, I've only had it in patty
Like Gott's
form.
Roadside, I think, is probably the biggest chain right now using the
Right.
product, and they serve it as a burger. And I'm pretty sure they just get it as 4-ounce patties that they cook just like their normal burgers.
Cool. How many of you guys have had Impossible Burger or Beyond Meat burgers? Awesome. Cool. And how many of you guys are eating it for ethical reasons?
And how many of you are eating it just because you wanted to see what it was like?
And how many of you are eating it for health reason? Awesome. So it's pretty diverse. again, going back to Kenji's quote, taste everything at least once and relax. It's only pizza. So I think it's good. I think it's good that we have meat alternatives. I don't think of it as a competitor to Hodo. If anything, I think of it as helping Hodo get more attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Simply because, like, we joke at Hodo that we are a food company. We just happen to use tofu to make that food. So if you think about it in that vein, we just want to make good food. And it happens to be made with a legume. And fortunately, it happens to be damn delicious. And that's what really matters. It really comes back to taste. And, you know, you can eat it for taste. You can eat it for health. You can eat it for ethical reason. We can't politicize it. Because tofu is probably the most politicized food in the US.
It's pretty politicized. I think there's a question
Yeah.
about that in there.
Exactly. Should we go to that
We
question
should go to
next?
that question.
Let's see, something about, where was that?
Causing, I don't know, tofu causing autism or something?
Oh, right. So there's a tofu about, am I gonna grow man boobs if I eat too much tofu? I always get that one. You see any on me?
Thanks.
Wow. Wait, oh man, look at this
just
dish.
like beef.
Looks just like beef. It's, we just might have to interrupt ourselves to try this. 1 second. Well, I'll talk with a mouthful in about 1 minute. Oh my goodness. Oh my God. Oh my God. See that tofu? Smoke. You know, no wonder they're not paying attention to us. They're eating this delicious dish. You are? You don't have to because we're not paying attention to you. We're eating this delicious dish. So going back to the question of man boobs.
You have me all sensitive because of the whole.
Do you want to answer that
tofu thing.
question?
No, I don't think I'm qualified.
So
Almost qualified to talk about man boobs, but not.
So I'll give two answers. The first one's kind of funny. If you happen to eat a lot of tofu and you do grow man boobs, come talk to me because we can start a different business. Okay? So if actually that happens to you, I think we can make a lot of money with that business. So the second answer is, if you actually eat anything in excess, you probably will grow man boobs. Okay? So we don't think you should eat tofu every day, 7 days a week at massive quantity. Just like we don't think you should eat meat 7 days a week at massive quantity either. For me, moderation in everything, eat a diverse diet. Tofu happens to be a delicious food that you can eat several times a week, make delicious recipe, and I'm pretty sure you won't grow man boobs.
I mean, it is one of those things. It's like if any of that is true, then why doesn't everybody in Asia have man boobs?
That's another way of looking at it. Yes.
But you know, but it also is one of those things that it's it is in the press, you know, and there are a lot of people who believe it. So I mean, is it a challenge you face to like that to educate people about the reality behind this?
So we at Hodo have spent almost 15 years really demystifying tofu from pretty much every angle. The first thing we try to do is to explain the science behind it. To produce, actually the first thing we did was actually to try to produce a really delicious tofu first. Because we think that if you like it, you don't care if you get man boobs. So we want you to really love tofu, and then we basically start to educate you about all the ways you can use this amazing ingredient. But so we try to really stay away from the health piece because I'm not a doctor, and we've had so many people come up to me at the farmer's market or even today and say, hey, I hear eating tofu could be detrimental to my health. And I really said to them, I'd say, you should really go talk to your doctor because there are lots of things that could be detrimental to your health if you eat too much of it. And I'm not qualified to give you that answer because there's an inherent conflict of interest here. I'm trying to sell you tofu, you know? So at the end of the day, what I say to people is, A, most of the research that's done on soy, and I'm using it very differently from tofu, is done not with tofu. It's done with soy protein isolate, which is a great product in its own right. It just happened to be a processed protein powder that is usually cheap, and you can, you know, it's used as feed, used in a lot of mock meat, and it's used in a lot of poor studies. Most studies on tofu in Japan and China have shown and that tofu is actually beneficial for your health. In fact, more recently, a lot of studies in the US on tofu have also shown that it's beneficial to your health. So I'll wrap this up. So the short answer
is... You sound like
is...
a tofu salesman.
I know. Yes. So several thousand years of tofu history has not produced man boobs, so you're safe. Okay. So that's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. Whew, that was an easy one. Let's see what else. Oh, maybe you can answer this one. What other foods use gypsum?
What other foods use gypsum?
Yeah. I don't have an answer. You stumped us.
I don't know.
You get a prize for stumping Kenji.
Yeah. Drywall?
Actually, there's
Cat
that's
litter,
right.
I think.
So cocaine.
Cocaine,
Oh
yeah.
boy, I knew it. Turn the mic off.
Does anyone know if other foods use gypsum? I haven't heard of it anywhere else.
Dan? No? He's on it. All right.
All right.
We have some insiders in the audience that
Yeah.
might be able to give us beer. So
Beer.
gypsum is a mineral. There's another question here. It's like, where is it from? Why gypsum? It's literally mined, like calcium sulfate is another word for gypsum. So there are many sort of purity. You know, what makes our gypsum food grade?
Right. It just has to do with the purity
it's the purest,
level of it.
the purest level of this mineral. So if you use a less pure version, you can make a wall with it. Like the plaster of Paris is gypsum.
Right.
Or you can use an exceptionally pure version. That's super expensive.
Do you know how pure the gypsum you use is?
I think it's like 99, I have to look it up. Damn, you stumped me. 99 point something % pure.
0.44, like ivory soap. Right?
Yeah, it's gonna be the most expensive wall to build. Trump won't use it to build a wall if he has to build one. So, next question. This is not a question, but I love the note. Tilapia is the tofu of the sea. Discuss. I'm sorry, we're not gonna discuss that one, but that's a really cool one.
If you think the tilapia that you're eating is coming from the sea, you're probably
Kenji's gonna dive into that one.
There's a reason it tastes like mud.
Oh boy.
Are you skipping the hard ones?
Yeah, you can look through that. I think there's another stack somewhere.
Oh, when are you going to start making Yuba roasts?
I was hoping you didn't
We're
ask
talking about my
that
dog
question.
here.
Yeah, Yuba roast.
When are you going to start making Yuba roasts again?
Never. That's a short answer. So Yuba roast, for those of you who've had the fortune of eating it, it's this beautiful, like round block of a roast that we make out of Yuba. Essentially what we do is we take our Yuba, we shred it, we marinate it, and then we bind it together in a cheesecloth, and we braise it in this delicious herbal broth, and then we form this beautiful roast. But we can't make it for many reasons, because A, we don't produce enough Yuba to make the roast. B, it's super labor intensive and it's super unsafe to make because of all the steps. During the holidays, we've tried to do it, but every year we get somebody burning him or herself. So I will give you the recipe. We have it. You're more than welcome to buy our Yuba, and you can call me up and I can help you make it. But we will not make it to sell again. It's highly unlikely. So I'm sorry.
This is a good one. Can you add flavors like spices or garlic into the tofu during the tofu making process?
The answer, you know the answer. You want to guess?
Do I want to guess the answer?
Yes.
I would guess that the answer is probably yes for certain things.
That's right. So when we were coagulating, we didn't talk about it, but if you take any fatty and high protein liquid, whether it's beans or nuts or milk, and you add acid, it curdles. In fact, that's how we accidentally discovered cheese. Mm-hmm. It's also how we accidentally discovered tofu. Thousands of years ago, some dude in Asia was cooking a pot of beans, just like everyone else in the world cooks beans. A pot of water, slow cooking. There's probably some excess water in that pot, and he decided to flavor it first with salt, didn't taste that great, then with vinegar, and it became coagulated tofu. So the first word, actually, the silkiest of tofu in Chinese is called dou hua, which means bean flour. So you can try this at home. You can take any milk and you just heat it up to about 150, 175, and just take a lemon and squeeze it on top of that warm liquid. It's gonna form this beautiful flour. So silky bean flour is the first form of tofu, dou hua.
Which is essentially like how like a lot of modern ricotta is made.
There you go, exactly. So that's how the acid goes inside the tofu to coagulate. So as long as you don't put anything acidic into the milk, you can add that flavor.
And is there a reason you don't?
Yes, there's a reason why we don't add. We've thought about adding various flavors inside the block of tofu during the coagulation process. Mm-hmm. So what we would do normally is, first we make the silken tofu, then we would break it up. Before scooping it into that block, we would drain the water, we would add herbs, vegetable, other non-acidic flavor, mm-hmm. and then make sure that the temperature, we have to do that quickly, so the temperature is still above 150, mm-hmm. and then we reform it with all of these ingredients inside. So, and it makes really yummy tofu. Here's the problem. The problem is we waste a lot of cheesecloths, because every flavor we do, we have to throw out that cheesecloth. We can't reuse it unless it's the exact same flavor.
Right.
So we used to make a really delicious, what we called a marinated tofu. That's very similar to the tofu that you're eating. Kim's got on her dish. It's got this kind of nutty, smoky, burnt soy umami flavor. But we can't do it because the economics just didn't make sense. Maybe another 5 years, when we become more well-known, we can charge you more and you're willing to pay for a more expensive tofu, then we can make it again. But the possibilities are endless when it comes to textures and flavor. And it's also the same reason why we get asked to these plant-based food conferences. Mm-hmm. Because we really anchor the traditional plant-based piece, and it's fascinating. We can make a lot of textures and flavor, it's just a lot more cost prohibitive mm-hmm. Than Impossible Burger or Beyond Meat.
Impossible Burger is pretty cost prohibitive.
You would know. Yeah. I've been eating it for free. So
more expensive than meat, for sure.
It helps to know the founder, so.
This one is maybe related to that, what you're just talking about. Have you ever had any product bloopers? Like what's the worst mistake you've made that never made it to market?
We can sit here for a long time, you and I. Absolutely, all the time. You know, people ask me that question. Like, we constantly have to experiment. We make a lot of mistakes. Fortunately for us, we're still small enough of a company that we encourage it. For those of you who happen to be sitting next to some of my colleagues out there, you can ask them. I encourage them to take risks and make mistakes all the time. And it's part of innovation is to be able to do that. So we do have bloopers. I have a lot of crazy ideas, and I would say, hey, try this. And some of them are really good ideas by accident. Like one time, I was I put some okara, which is what Kim used, and in the oven, and I forgot about it. I just mixed it with some soy sauce and salt and pepper, and I burnt it because I left it in there for too long, and it turned out to be the best bacon, smoky bacon that I've ever made. And in fact, I tried to trick some of my colleagues that they were bacon. So we might actually do that again. But that's an accident, a good blooper.
A good blooper.
But we're coming out with a line of products that I can share with you. It's going to come out in the springtime, but we cut these tofu into cubes, and then we're marinating them or tossing them with actual dry herbs. Most of them are Middle Eastern, Moroccan type flavors, because we don't think it has to be Asian flavors. And they're super easy. You just toss them on a wok for five minutes in high heat. And the textures and the flavors are really incredible. But to make these 3 flavors, we actually, you know, we screwed up like 20 different ones.
Yeah.
So happens all the time. Do you have bloopers?
Oh, I mean, I'm like currently in the
scientist.
process of opening a restaurant, and we're trying to. I mean, our goal is to make it. I mean, like what Nick said, our goal is to make it so that everything on the menu is something I'm really excited about, and we've been testing recipes for. Well, I've been testing them at home for like about 6 months, and now we've been testing them at the restaurant for about 3 weeks now, and yeah, every day is like a series of refinements and honestly throwing away a lot of stuff because it doesn't come out the way we want it to. But yeah, I mean that's the process with any kind of recipe development, whether it's a home cook trying to perfect something that they love, or it's you know, in industry or at a restaurant, you got to make a lot of mistakes before you get it right.
Yeah, and it's nice. Like as we get slightly bigger, we're a teenager of a company now. We can take slightly bigger risks in terms of testing with you as a customer.
Yeah.
We like to think of ourselves as sort of almost like a software company, just like put it out there, do the alpha, the beta, and test it, and if it doesn't work, let's just fold it. And with food, it's a lot of fun, you know, because we have a lot of fans that we can send products out to test. So it's really neat to be able to do that. It's a luxury to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Before I forget, just going back to the previous question about health and the politicizing of tofu, there's a piece, you won't find it, but if you Google CBC radio, which is the Canadian equivalent of, Canadian NPR, woohoo! They just did a piece on tofu that I think is probably, no, I can say definitively, it's the best piece on the history of tofu in the West that's ever been done. And I can capture it in one sentence or two, which is tofu is not the panacea for the environment. It's not going to kill your baby. It's just a really delicious food. So if you listen to the entire 30 minutes, it's really amazing. So the reason I tell you that now is if you knew about it, you wouldn't be sitting here. You would know everything. Right?
Got it. Do you want to do a couple? There's a couple questions for the
dessert
chefs
out
here.
yet?
I don't know if.
Are you guys eating dessert? Oh, we didn't. Oh, you finished dessert. That was my doing. That's the traditional silken tofu with ginger syrup. Yay! We didn't get some.
This is one.
Couple more questions?
There's some for the chefs,
Before
but
you
I
have
think you
to
might know
sign
this
some
one.
books?
Were the wraps of the tofu water dumplings made with Yuba? Was
No.
the question. That, it's just
Henry
a wheat
did not
dough, right?
make that. Yeah, that's just a wheat dumpling. So sorry.
And have you two presented together before?
No. The reason we couldn't make the dumpling with Yuba is Yuba does not have gluten, and as such, it will not stick. So for Yuba to stick together, you literally have to get a toothpick or something to sew it together.
Or could
because there's no gluten.
Could you just paint like a little bit of a flour paste on it, on the edge of it?
It's super hard. Yeah.
Super hard.
You
okay.
can try it, because I would love to see you try that. No, it just doesn't stick. It's gluten-free. Tofu is gluten-free.
This one's interesting. Can you share more about the source and varieties of soybeans? What's important in selecting beans? Where the most flavorful beans grown?
So all of our soybeans are sourced in the U.S. In the Midwest. We work with a handful of various farmers to contract. So we are guaranteed a supply of organic soybeans and non-GMO. Here's something neat about soybeans. Unlike wheat and other plants, you can't contaminate through the flowers of soybeans. So if you grow organic soybeans, it would have to come from an organic seed. So cross-contamination of wheat and corn won't happen with soy, which is kind of cool. So all of our soybeans are organic. We do work with a specific range of protein, fat, and sugar level of the soybeans, because we want to make a specific type of tofu that's really tasty. And so we source for that, and we encourage our farmers to sort of go back and reach back for heirloom varieties as long as they meet our protein and fat requirement.
So when a farmer is growing like a field of soybeans, do generally all the beans coming off of it have a similar breakdown as far as fat and protein, or do they take them and then grade them, and some of them go to the cows and some of them go to Hodo soy? Or?
No, so you have to start the crop with a new set of seeds. And if those seeds come from, already have a specification, and they will produce something comparable. What you sort is not so much the protein or the fat or the sugar, etc. What you source is the size. So people care, just like ugly fruit and pretty fruit, in soybeans there's that too. Why? It's because in the process of rehydrating and such, different sizes, absorption rate and whatnot, it's different. So what you look for is, similar size, minimum pest damage, and high protein, high fat, good sugar content. So that's what we look for when we source.
Got it. I think that's most of the
And one more thing is,
here.
unlike some of the science stuff that Kenji writes about in his book, we make a traditional, what we call traditional handmade tofu. If you look on videos of any of Hodo Soy's facility in tofu making, you see a lot of stainless steel bowls and such. What we have is what I call the biggest traditional tofu facility you can build without compromising the traditional method. So these bowls and these sort of robotic arms are meant to do two things. One is remove as many of the heavy lifting as possible, because they can injure our employees. And two is to give as much precision as possible in terms of measuring the amount of liquid, the temperature, for example. But the science of tofu is not very specific. So you can have the temperature anywhere between 150 and 200, and you can still coagulate. If you use slightly less coagulant, slightly more coagulant, you can still make a silken tofu. You're just not optimizing the yield of that tofu. So the range, it's quite broad. So you can actually make some scientific chemistry mistakes and still come out with a decent tofu.
Or you can do what I did and come up with something inedible.
So
it should be a pretty forgiving food.
It's a forgiving
I remember
range.
now what I did the first time I tried to make silken tofu, and it didn't work. I poured the coagulant into the pot, I stirred it in, and then I let it sit, and it didn't. It did not do the same thing that it did this time.
Did you use nigari or calcium sulfate?
I think I used nigari. Yeah, I'm positive.
Actually,
I used
nigari would work that way. Should work.
Well, did it?
Yeah. So, where I can't. There's Tui. I have no clue
is
what time it is.
8:53 according
I
to
think
this
that we're supposed to wrap up so our chefs and our writers can sign more books for you. I want to remind you yet again, please fill out the evaluation form. Yes. Thank you, Thuy. I hope you enjoyed the evening. It's been really fun for me and Kenji. We did not practice this at all, so it's even more fun. Go to his new restaurant. You want to tell him where it is?
Oh, it's in San Mateo. It's called Verstal. It's a sausage place in San Mateo.
And it's not open yet.
It's open on the 26th, and the food is way simpler than anything that we were served tonight.
But it's exciting because you've gone from author to restaurant. Restaurant.
It's a beer garden, so we focus on sausage, but we actually have a ton of vegetarian and vegan stuff there as well.
And you kind of pay homage to your European heritage a little bit?
Well, yeah, my dad is actually Pennsylvania Dutch, so yeah, his family was German. So we are, we're very, very loosely German. We're more of like a West Coast beer hall is what we're calling ourselves. So,
Cool. All right, thank you, and have a good evening. Yeah.